Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Rixon podcast. I am here with Dr. Georgianna Shea, and we're super excited to talk about cyber resilience and what that means. So, thank you, Dr. Shea, for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. And please call me
So,
George.
oh, okay, George. So, George is the chief technologist for the Foundation for Defense and Democracies, it's sometimes shortened for as FDD, the Center on Cyber and Technology Innovation. Gosh, that is a mouthful. So, apologies for barely getting that right. She is also a board member at Rixon. And fairly recently, she served on the Cyber Physical Resilience Working Group of the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, which is also known as PCAST. I think you only work on things that have very long names.
Yes, and it has to have a bunch of acronyms as well.
Yes, PCAST, FDD, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And I'll probably mention at some point in the podcast that I was working with GRF and their BRC on the ORF and go over all those letters as well.
It's fitting because in cybersecurity, we just have endless acronyms. So, of course, you would also have these acronyms with the different organizations you work with. Okay, let's talk about cyber resilience. What does that mean? What does cyber resilience mean?
So I look at resilience as being able to anticipate, withstand, recover, and adapt from various cyber events. Typically, when you talk about cybersecurity, people are going to think about what do I have to do in terms of compliance? What are the controls that you're putting in? What does the audit look like? What are the requirements under GDPR, PCI, RMF? Whatever that is. Putting in the actual protections in your system. But resilience really goes beyond just the cybersecurity. It's merging what is the mission of the organization or the system, and how do you ensure that you are able to continue that mission in a degraded state, or when you're under attack, or when something's happening, so that you can meet that requirement of continuous operations. And that
Yeah.
might be, looking at, again, not the controls, but, identifying that critical path of your processes and the technologies that are required, and identifying that, oh, you have a choke point here. Like, you have one particular system, and if that goes down, then you can't continue to function, or whatever that streamline is that goes through there would be affected. So building in the redundancy that is required to ensure that piece. So I really usually kind of get back to the engineering fundamentals of the organization and the relationships. And it's not just I'll talk a lot about the components usually, but it's really the people, process, and technologies, and exploring that critical path amongst all of those to ensure that the mission is still met when there's some type of degraded or adverse event that's taking place.
Yeah, I liken it to kind of like the Boy Scout on the camping trip, right? Like they're prepared for anything and no
Yeah,
matter what
always be
happens.
prepared. Yeah. Yeah, be able to anticipate something. So, be aware of what's going on, anticipate that, and make sure you can get through it.
Yeah. Resilience and cyber resilience aren't necessarily new terms, but I mean, I've just in things that I've read recently, like they seem to become, those words seem to come up a lot recently. So
Good,
my question is, yes, good.
good.
Yeah, maybe it's just one of those things where, like when you're thinking about buying a new car and then all of a sudden you see that car everywhere. So maybe it was just, I saw resilience and then I just started seeing it everywhere. But why is that important now? Like why should businesses care, and why is it kind of coming up more and more
Uh,
recently?
well, I don't think I'm a good judge of it coming up more, because I kind of live in that space, and I would say by trade, you would probably put me into a cybersecurity field, but I try to. That's actually, I hate that word cybersecurity, because it doesn't really mean anything unless you go through and define what are the requirements behind that. What are you trying to meet? And when you say things like make something cyber secure, that doesn't really, what specifically do I need to do? What am I doing? What are the requirements? What is the required outcome? And I now push, make sure things are resilient. So again, whatever that mission is for the organization or the system, how do you ensure that you're able to continue that mission? I would have to believe that maybe you're hearing more of resilience because the public sector is now seeing more impact on our interconnected systems out there. They look at our critical infrastructure. There's a lot of interdependencies among systems and organizations. So you have things like the CrowdStrike issue that happened a couple months ago, where there's a piece of software that wasn't adequately tested. It gets deployed, and now it has this ripple effect, not just on one or two organizations, but a ripple effect across all of critical infrastructure, down to my mom using ancestry.com and calling me and saying the internet's broken. So when it's starting to touch everyone, and including my mom, then it starts to become sort of a forefront piece of what is going on. And organizations have to be able to anticipate those type of issues, whether it's testing issues, hacking issues, natural disaster issues, because everything is so interconnected, and it is such impactful, and there are so many ripple effects throughout, not just the country, but the world, that you have to start to build in and look at the resilience of your organization, and how you can continue that mission.
I love that. And you're totally speaking my language. So I'm so glad I asked you this question.
Okay, good.
One of the things that you said was like, what does cybersecurity even mean? It's meaningless unless it's applied to the context of your organization and your organization's mission. So that like really resonates with me. So I really like how you tie it back to the mission. And then what my previous question was like, why should businesses care? That's exactly it, is what you're saying. Like this ties to your mission, which is how you probably make money, right? So there's a business incentive to ensure that your mission, whatever that is, whether that's, I think you've used this example before, whether that's like supplying water to the city, or whether it's making widgets, or whatever it is, whatever your critical objective is, like that's what you are trying to preserve.
Right.
Can you, so I gave a couple examples, but could you give, just to make it a little bit more concrete for people, like what exactly do you mean when you're,
In terms of resilience, yeah.
yes.
So you mentioned that I worked on the cyber physical systems resilience paper for the President's Council of Advisors for Science and Technology, the PCAST. We put out a number of different recommendations in there, some high level recommendations on resilience, and we brought up some examples of past issues like the Colonial Pipeline. So the Colonial Pipeline is a great example of, there was a cyber attack on the office systems of the Colonial Pipeline, and they then shut down the access to the operational technology piece and cut the flow of fuel to the entire East Coast. Not really understanding the impact of that. So let's just contain this ransomware attack and make sure it doesn't spread. So we're going to cut access here, contain it, and then by the steps that were taken, then the East Coast didn't have fuel for, I forgot, a couple days, a week. It was almost a national disaster. I think people were filling Piggly Wiggly bags and plastic totes full of gasoline at the gas pump to ensure that they had it. So not understanding how the systems are interconnected to the mission, to the public, to your customers, that is a recipe for disaster. So you really have to understand what those impacts would be, and then internally how those technologies relate to each other. And then aside from the Colonial Pipeline, you can look at things like a log4j, for example. That was a piece of code a couple years ago that was found to be exploitable, and a lot of organizations didn't even know if they had it. Like, does this pertain to us? We don't really know. It's a piece of code that's within inside other pieces of code. So it's an embedded piece of code. And if they didn't have like a clear software bill of materials and an understanding of what their assets are, they're spending all of their time just trying to identify, are we susceptible to this? Before they can even take the mitigations to go through and say, okay, we are susceptible. Now let's go through and update this version to the secure version. You could look at Ukraine, not even on the cyber attack side, but if they were producing something, sending it to you, and then all of a sudden they're at war, that disrupts your supply chain and your dependencies. So do you have alternate dependencies? So it's just really important to go through and again map out what your mission is, what I call the mission, the minimal viable objective or service for your organization, which was a recommendation that was in the PCAST report, identifying what is that minimal viable service or product that you have to do to sustain operations and so that your customers can sustain operations. And as I mentioned at the beginning, that did come from the GRF, BRC, ORF. And so I'll explain those acronyms. There's an organization, the Global Resilience Federation, which works with many of the, I think about 17 or 19 of the various ISACs out there, your information sharing analysis centers. And those are your sort of belly buttons for different topic areas. So your K through 12 ISAC, your space ISAC, your operational technology ISAC, your manufacturing ISAC. I call it the like phone a friend. So if you're working in this industry and you want to talk to a similar organization, securely share information, have indications and warning, non-disclosure agreement kind of things, you can share information with them. So it's the phone a friend, like, hey, I work at a K through 12 organization. This is what we're seeing. These are our priorities. Another K through 12 organization is probably going to have the exact same issues and concerns. So you can share information. But anyway, so GRF works with a lot of those, and they've pulled together the BRC, the Business Resilience Council, which are representatives from various sectors of critical infrastructure. And in the United States, we have 16 designated sectors of critical infrastructure. So when I say critical infrastructure, I just don't mean like things that are important. I mean the designated sectors being water, energy, the defense industrial base, healthcare sector. I'm not going to name all of them, but those designated sectors. And then this BRC group had invited me to work with them on developing an operational resilience framework. So I liken it to a business continuity plan, but more advanced, a very advanced business continuity plan, because it's not just what are the risks, what are the impacts, and what do we need to do for backup, but it is identifying that minimal viable objective or service that the company has, looking at the upstream and downstream dependencies. Who are our suppliers? What does that look like? Could there be a choke point? Do we have redundancy? Do we have a stockpile if this is a flux capacitor and only one person makes it? What would it look like if the supply chain is disrupted? And then also looking at our customers and what do they have to have from us in order to continue their operations? Because as we saw with COVID, there's so many interdependencies and connections amongst organizations and in that supply chain of services and products that, when COVID hit, you're like, oh, we're not getting this because some mom and pop shop way down the supply chain had some issue, which then supplied a critical component to one organization, which then was a ripple effect through these major organizations. So, by understanding that, the ORF puts that into a business strategy for companies to better merge the business piece of it, the mission and processes with the technology. I think
Yeah,
that was a lot. I don't even know if I answered your question.
yeah.
Okay.
You did. You did. So one of the things that you talk about in the PCAST report was, and maybe this is kind of what you were getting at before. One of the recommendations is to, and I'm reading this. This is a quote: develop greater industry board, CEO, and executive accountability. Can you give some examples of what that might be and how we can incentivize that sort of accountability outside of the government just telling people that they have to?
Yeah. So on the yeah, it's very complex issue. When we talk about critical infrastructure, I think it's last I looked, 85% of our critical infrastructure is privately owned. So it's not the government said so, so you have to do this, or Cyber Command put out this order, and now all of the military is going to follow it. It's not the same pattern of activity. In the defense industrial base, it's a little easier. The Army said do it, so you're doing it. That's how the Army works. That's how the military works. That's how DoD works. But when you put that out to the financial sector, privately owned bank. Put it out to the healthcare sector, it's a privately owned hospital. Put it out to a lot of companies. They don't have the infinite resources that some of the other federal, I don't say infinite, not quite infinite, but they don't have to worry as much. They're not handed a
Seemingly
bucket of
infinite.
money.
Yeah.
Here's a bucket of money for cybersecurity. That doesn't happen in the private industry. They're utilities, for example. You're charging customers, and then the money you get from those charges, you then have to put back into your company for services, payroll, other activity, developing product, and cybersecurity is one of those very difficult areas to have a return on investment. Why do I explain to me why I need to spend $1 billion on this particular thing when we haven't been hacked yet? What's the risk? Like, we've been fine without it. Why do we have to spend this money now? So it's a constantly evolving thing. It's a very difficult argument to make. And the board engagement and getting CEOs involved is it is convincing them of the importance of building out these resilient strategies, investing in cybersecurity, convincing them that there's really two types of organizations out there: those that have been compromised and those that are going to be compromised, and convincing them that you may think that you can accept this risk, and maybe they can, but understand the rippling effects of that. You can look at the Target breach from years ago now. I think it was like in 2015. Target had a breach, and that ended up being billions of dollars worth of cost to them. So to incentivize boards and the CEO piece, the PCAST report talked about better engagement, public-private partnerships, involving the private sector more, having relationships and sharing more information with them. On the federal side, there's usually more access to the intelligence that's available. We're seeing these types of things. We're seeing this type of nation state attacking our organizations. The commercial sector doesn't necessarily have that kind of insight. So by sharing that intel and sharing the threat and sharing what we're expecting and what we're seeing across other sectors, that's helpful. And then to incentivize them, it's really I guess there's a couple ways you can do that. One is to help paint that picture of what is the impact. If you don't invest in these strategies or technologies, then you may be that Colonial Pipeline. You may be that organization that's preventing the entire East Coast from having gasoline for a large period of time. Or you may have the financial burden of recovering from ransomware attacks or other areas. One of the recommendations we had talked about, and I don't know if it actually made it into the paper. I don't remember, but it was I don't want to say public shaming, but it was transparency. You know, looking at the idea of posting or requiring companies to show what are they doing for that resilience and cybersecurity, and are they how are they meeting some of these different requirements out there? And if they're not, or they're not investing in cybersecurity, how much money are you investing in cybersecurity? 1%, half a percent, 0.3%, 20%. I mean, it ranges. And if the public is seeing that you're not investing, then ultimately there's going to be a big issue. So maybe just through that public shaming, they would be motivated. I don't think we actually put that in the paper, but it was a fun discussion. We actually compared that to environmental standards, where companies put out their environmental footprint and what they're doing, and because you can see like, oh, this particular industry or company has like this large of a carbon footprint, it was embarrassing to them. So then they lessened it and then took on measures to reduce that. So we talked about that. But I think through sharing of information, that helps incentivize them. Understanding the financial impact, I think that helps incentivize them. And really just the impact to their ecosystem and the rest of the country, that should incentivize them, but they'd have to understand really what that means.
Yeah, really painting that picture.
I kind of feel like the silver bullet for motivating not just CEOs and board members is the insurance industry. So I think the insurance industry is going to end up being the cyber savior to the country once they get all of their ducks in a row and get organized and put out meaningful direction, because right now I think there's a little bit disparate. Once the insurance industry says, we're not going to insure you unless you do X, Y, and Z, that's really going to motivate companies, because they're like, oh, we need insurance. In the cybersecurity field, when you take basic classes, they talk about, different types of risk management. And there's risk transference, transferring the risk. And I think that's changing a lot since ransomware, because the example usually given is you can transfer the risk. You can just like, we have insurance, so who cares? We'll just have them pay it out. But insurance companies aren't insuring in people anymore, because it's a huge payout. The insurance industry is sort of imploding on the cyber side of things. It's not just the cost of the computer that was infected that you have to replace. It's not like a car, oh, crashed it, need to replace the car. This is cost of a new car. There you go. It's the cost of a new car, a retraining system, the cost of the ransomware itself, which might be like $1 million, $10 million, whatever. The audits, the third party specialty people you bring in. So it's not quite the same insurance model as we just crashed our car, replace it. It's a lot of money. It's exponential to the actual cost of the equipment. So the insurance industry, in my mind, is eventually going to lead everyone to, this is what you really need to do, and we're not going to accept just risk transferring anymore.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, nothing like the insurance company telling you what you have to
Right,
do.
right. I mean, you talk about the federal government telling you what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it'll be the insurance companies.
There you have it.
Yeah,
The inside scoop. I want to shift gears and talk about a recent CSO article. The title of the article was European Law Enforcement Breaks High-End Encryption App Used by Suspects. And in the article, you say CISOs should be taking note of the diminishing lifespans of current encryption standards. So sorry for kind of like abruptly changing subjects, but it was a really interesting article, and I thought what you said and what you explained in it was really interesting as well. So when you're talking about the diminishing lifespan of current encryption standards, can you talk about what you mean there?
sure. So we've already started on the federal side to go through and move to new algorithms for encryption. Um, so you have basic encryption. Encryption is based on math, and it's hard math. And so with the development of quantum computing, the math is getting easier to break, because the computational power of quantum computing is so advanced. So that means new algorithms are being developed based on harder math. I mean, just to keep it super simple, yeah. So the math is getting harder, and there's requirements in the federal space right now to change to these new algorithms that work with the harder math, to make it more difficult with the expected development of crypto relevant quantum computers, CRQCs, which are the computers that can break encryption, modern day encryption. And in modern day encryption right now, you look at RSA encryption. With the way computers work, it's expected that it would take 1 billion years to break the encryption. However, with a quantum computer, that same encryption is expected to be broken within like 6 minutes. So that means no more passwords are safe, no more encryption is safe, no more data security. Everything can be broken. So the solution is harder math for more computational power. And so it's, in my mind, sort of a never-ending power, or never-ending problem of computing power versus hard math, because we're going to have harder math and more advanced computing power in the next 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is. So I believe if you just remove the math problem and approach things from an information theoretic secure state, where you're not relying on the math, but you're relying on the complexity. So regardless of how much computational power you have, you still have secure data. An example of that is distributed data storage. So if I have all of my data in one database, and I have encryption on it, if someone were to break into that particular database, they have access to the data, it's now encrypted, they go through, break the hard math, they have all your data. But if you take the same data and you were to distribute it in multiple locations, so you have fragments of data everywhere, you would first have to go through and collect all of those pieces of data to get them together before you can then apply that quantum computing capability to go through and break the encryption. And so there's strategies in place, the distributed storage, tokenization, which is a big piece of how to ensure the confidentiality of your data. So if the information is compromised, they're not getting anything. It's a multi-layered approach to security, and you don't have to worry about that quantum piece of it. And I will say, if you have this conversation about quantum computing with people, the idea that comes up usually is, well, it's like 30 years out. Who cares? No big deal. I would really like to see a conversation between, and I'm not a quantum expert. I research it, I study it, but I'm not a quantum expert in any way. I just look at it from the cybersecurity standpoint. But you have experts in that field that are, actively working on the development of those CRQCs, those cryptographically relevant quantum computers, and they have wildly different opinions based on their work and what they're seeing in their research. Some experts, bona fide expert in that area, believes we're gonna get to that stage where we have to worry about breaking of modern day encryption within the next 5 years, probably 2 years. But then you have an equally qualified expert that says it's like 30 years, so who cares? And then people will go through and hear both of those opinions, and they will, depending on their own position, their own bias on how they feel, like, oh, I don't have to worry about it for 30 years, so I'm not going to worry about it. But that's not necessarily the case anymore, because now there are steps that have been taken by the federal government to move over to the new algorithms. You have to take some action if you're going to align with the government and the federal standards, and you need to be aware of it. So if you're the CTO, CISO, CIO, you're buying new equipment, developing an architecture, setting up systems, you're going to want to look at what is that future standard. What are those new algorithms that we have to use, and implement those that you're compatible with the system, and then know that, okay, regardless if it's 2 years from now or 30 years from now, it's still a threat. So when you buy this equipment or you develop these architectures and you have these strategies, are you are you planning for 30 years out, or are you planning for like just 1 year out? Take out the math. That's what I say. Yeah.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And I want to kind of drill down a little bit deeper. I'm sure you can anticipate what my next questions will be. So when you're talking about like this strategic, you say multi-layered, like I want to unpack that a little bit. Some of the things that you say in this CSO online article are multi-layered defenses such as tokenization, zero knowledge proofs, distributed storage, and other technologies that encrypt data even if or that protect data even if encryption is compromised. So those are a lot of terms, and you kind of sprinkled them in, as you were explaining this, but I'm hoping that we can drill a little bit deeper into each one of them. Um,
Okay, so tokenization. Tokenization, is the process of replacing the actual data with tokens. I don't know if you remember going to Chuck E. Cheese. I did not. I tried to never go to Chuck E. Cheese, but every now and then my sons were invited to go there. You
yeah, I
don't
have
get
bad.
you don't hand your kids like, here's $20. You go to the token machine. You give the money to the machine or the person, and they then give you tokens, and then you just give your kids the tokens. They run around the arcade putting the tokens in the machine, so they're not actually handling the money, the sensitive currency. They're just dealing with those representations of the money. So if, let's just say, your child is then cornered in the ball pit, and someone's like, give me all your money. It's not really the money, it's just the tokens. I'm sure for the child it's just as traumatic. They don't get to play as many games, but the money itself is still protected because it was never actually in the ball pit with the kids. So the tokenization strategy, is that way of ensuring that, again, if the encryption is broken, someone gets into your system, your data flows, and they're able to, man in the middle attack it, or wherever it's being stored, get to that data. It's not the data. It's just representation of the data.
It's a darn Chuck E. Cheese
It's
token.
it's just Chuck E. Cheese tokens. Yeah.
That would make an attacker mad.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, oh, I broke into it and this is useless. It's
Yes.
useless data. So the
Yep.
actual crown jewel sensitive data, your PII, your PHI, all those elements that you're trying to protect, they're still protected.
Awesome. I love that's a great analogy. The Chuck
I
E.
just came
Cheese.
up with that. I should
That's
have thought
great.
about that before. But I was like, yeah, that's yeah. Some
The next thing
sneaky,
that I
dirty
asked you about
tokens. Yeah.
was zero knowledge proofs. So explain those to us.
So zero knowledge proofs are that kind of gets it's sort of a scenario by scenario situation in which you would use it. There's a lot of data sharing that takes place amongst organizations for audits or whatever what maybe for compliance you have to share information. So a zero knowledge proof is a way of sharing information without having to share your sensitive information. So it may not apply in all instances, but you can definitely use it in some instances. And I'll give you an example on something I'm working on. So within the PCAST paper, we had recommended the stand up of an organization called the National Critical Infrastructure Observatory, which would act as a digital twin for critical infrastructure. So you have an understanding of the security and resilience posture of all of the critical systems, critical infrastructure of the United States. Because right now you don't really have that belly button out there on like what is our posture. So if you develop this sort of digital twin organization, it would then have to get information from organizations. And we just talked about how 85% of critical infrastructure is privately owned. So I don't know a lot of private organizations. If the government says, hey, send me a copy of your like your like all of the CVEs that you're compliant with, or your like passwords, simple pass. Like send me a list of all your passwords so we can ensure that they're at least 16 characters with special characters, capital letters, lowercase letters, and symbols. Yeah, they're gonna be like, yeah, no, I'm not sending you a list of my passwords. Just take my word for it that we're good. And they're gonna say, no, we don't want to just take your word for it. We want some type of verification to understand that you're using complex passwords, basic cyber hygiene. So instead of the organization sending in, here's a list of all my passwords for you to verify them, the two organizations, this made up organization that we're promoting, and the organization they're working with, would work with maybe a third party organization that would develop a proof that goes through all of their like a sort of a scan. Let me scan all of your passwords and do a simple check. Is there a capital letter? Is there a lowercase letter? Is it 16 characters? Is there a special character? Is there a number? And then for every password on the on that that private company that they're trying to get the information from, it would come back as yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Hopefully, it comes back all as yeses. And then the organization they're sending it to, like this National Critical Infrastructure Observatory, they would then get the responses yes, like it meets it yes. So they both trust the proof. They both looked at the proof. They know the code and they know what it looked for. And now they both trust, yes, you absolutely have complex passwords that are meeting these requirements without me having to see your passwords. So it's a zero knowledge proof. I don't know what any of your passwords are, but I have the confidence that they are meeting the requirement because we both trusted this particular proof that was written, this code, and now I can say confidently, yes, you're doing this. So it's a way to again exchange information from organization to organization without sharing the PII, the PHI, the GDPR issues, that protected data, or the sensitive data, or even something as simple as I want to know that again which of your systems may be affected by this new CVE that came out, and you can run scans throughout the organization, and the Nessus scans that come out of it would then say this software version compatible not. Nobody wants to show their attack surface out there. Like these are all the software pieces I'm using. So instead of showing that sensitive information, you could just come back with yes, no, yes, yes, no. So it's a simple way to have trusted verification and shared information.
Awesome. That's really helpful. Also, I've never heard anyone explain it so succinctly
Oh,
before. I feel like I understand it a lot better. I know that we're at time here, so I want to say thank you so much for sharing your insights. Like such cool stuff that you're working on, and really appreciate you taking the time to unpack this all. Um, so again, George works for FDD, and then the PCAST report I will link to in the show notes. Any parting words for our listeners?
No, thank you for having me. And I guess I will finish with what I started with, and that's, focus more on resilience than cybersecurity.
Yeah. CISOs everywhere are like, what?
Yeah, I know. It makes no sense, and we're pushing everyone into the cyber field right now with STEM, and I don't even think the word resilience comes up. So they're like, I'm supposed to do these things. I'm like, no, no, no. Have the big picture. Implement the big picture and mission success.
Love it. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.